What if everyone scrolling through this screen, regardless of eye color, passport stamp, or favorite streaming service, shares the same epic, planet-spanning road trip? A journey that kicked off roughly 315,000 years ago with a handful of restless wanderers in Africa. This isn't science fiction. It's the story of us, and the souvenirs from that journey are still coded in your DNA. Stick around, because the real itinerary of humanity beats any fantasy plot, and you are its living conclusion. Welcome back, time travelers. I'm here to hand you the boarding pass for the longest, most improbable journey ever taken, our own. Forget the dusty textbooks and monotone lectures. This is a story stitched from ancient fossils, decoded genes, and the faint, persistent campfire smell that never quite left our collective memory. We're rewinding the clock to Africa, about 315,000 years before the first like button was ever clicked, to find the starting line for every single person on Earth today. Seat backs up because we're about to meet the family. The African cradle. Our story begins not in one single Garden of Eden, but across the vast, dynamic landscapes of Africa. At a site called Jebel Irhoud in present-day Morocco, archaeologists unearthed the remains of the earliest known Homo sapiens. Dated to around 315,000 years ago, these weren't quite people you'd pass on the street without a second glance. They had our characteristically flat, delicate faces, but their brain cases were longer and lower, more like a football than the soccer ball shape in our heads today, a primitive feature echoing more ancient ancestors. And they weren't alone. This wasn't a story of a single tribe. Picture dozens of genetically diverse groups scattered from the Kalahari Desert to the Mediterranean coast, separated for millennia by shifting forests and deserts. Whenever the climate allowed, these groups would meet, trade, and mix their genes, creating a vast, continent-wide human mosaic. That genetic diversity is why Africa today holds more human genetic variation than the rest of the world combined. Life, though, was no picnic. It was a world of lethal predators and a climate that could flip from lush paradise to killer drought in a few generations. Survival demanded innovation. On the southern coast of South Africa, at a place called Pinnacle Point, someone around 164,000 years ago discovered fire wasn't just for cooking, it was for engineering. They learned to carefully heat a brittle stone called silkrete in controlled hearths, transforming it into a superior raw material for making razor-sharp blades. This wasn't just tool-making, it was alchemy. These advanced tools made them more efficient hunters and gave them a crucial edge. And the innovation wasn't just practical. In Blombos Cave, also in South Africa, people were engraving abstract crosshatch patterns onto pieces of ochre as far back as 100,000 years ago. They were collecting shells, piercing them to be strung as beads, and using red ochre pigment for what might have been body paint, sunscreen, or insect repellent. These weren't just decorative doodles, they were symbols, the earliest glimmers of art and identity. They were the beta versions of culture, the software that allowed us to cooperate, build social networks, and define ourselves as us. First footsteps out fast forward to about 125,000 years ago. The world was warming, sea levels were fluctuating, and green corridors opened up across the deserts. A few of these African groups looked north and east and decided to see what was out there. Two main doors stood open. Door number 1 was a land route, up the Nile River Valley and across the Sinai Peninsula into the Levant. Door number 2 was a sea route, a short hop across the Bab el Mandeb Strait at the southern end of the Red Sea. Archaeological evidence from the Skull and Kafse caves in modern-day Israel shows that Homo sapiens made it out of Africa via the northern route as early as 120,000 years ago. They lived there for a time, burying their dead with rituals, but ultimately these migrations were a false start. Climate change likely turned their green corridors back into impassable desert, and they faced competition from other human species, the Neanderthals, who were already well adapted to the colder environment. For tens of thousands of years, the cosmic bouncers said, "Not yet," and these pioneering populations either retreated or died out, leaving only their fossils as proof of their journey. The green light then, around 70,000 years ago, everything changed. The climate flashed the greenest light our ancestors had ever seen. Monsoon patterns shifted, creating a freshwater corridor that turned the Arabian Peninsula and the path to India into a rolling savanna, a moving buffet of game, fruit, and fresh water. This was the big one, the migration that would stick. Geneticists can trace this monumental exodus to a single group. All non-Africans alive today are descended from the bearers of a specific genetic marker in their mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, known as haplogroup L3. Mitochondrial DNA is passed down only from mother to child, creating a direct, unbroken line back through time. The woman who was the source of the L3 lineage lived in East Africa just before this great migration. Her descendants, a small founder group of maybe only a few hundred to 1,000 people, were the ones who successfully crossed out of Africa and never looked back. They likely took the southern coastal route, hugging the shores of Arabia, then Persia, and within just a few thousand years, their descendants had reached India and Southeast Asia. It was a journey of generations, each one pushing a little further into the unknown, carrying with them stories of a homeland their great-grandchildren would never see. Tools, fire, and the neighborhood watch leaving Africa meant stepping into a world full of new challenges. The predators were bigger, the winters were harsher, and the neighbors were different. Europe and Asia had been home to Neanderthals and another mysterious group, the Denisovans, for hundreds of thousands of years. Our ancestors survived by being adaptable. Their Middle Stone Age toolkit evolved into the sophisticated Swiss army knives of the Upper Paleolithic. They invented spear throwers or atlatls, which effectively doubled their killing range. They crafted fine bone needles to sew fitted layered clothing for insulation. Fire was the universal remote, a tool for everything, keeping cave bears out, turning indigestible tubers into calorie-rich meals, and extending the day for social bonding and tool-making. But they didn't just invent, they also assimilated. We know from our own DNA that our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. Today, most non-Africans carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, which contributes to things like our skin's response to sunlight and our immune systems. Some populations in Asia and Oceania inherited DNA from the Denisovans, including a special gene, EPAS1, which helps people today, like native Tibetans, live in low-oxygen, high-altitude environments. By mixing with these archaic humans, our ancestors picked up a genetic toolkit that had been adapting to local conditions for millennia, giving them a fast-track pass to survival. Art before Instagram. By 40,000 years ago, our ancestors hit a cultural afterburner. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about expression. In a cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, an artist painted a life-sized warty pig, which has been dated to at least 45,500 years ago, the oldest known figurative animal painting in the world. In the Chauvet cave in France, charcoal lions, rhinos, and horses thunder across the walls, so vivid they seemed to breathe in the torchlight. These weren't random doodles. They were stories, rituals, maps of the mind, the original status updates saying, "We were here, and this is what mattered to us." The artistic explosion was everywhere. Intricately carved Venus figurines appeared across Europe. And there was music. In the Hohlefels cave in Germany, archaeologists found a flute carefully crafted from a vulture's wing bone. At over 40,000 years old, it is one of the oldest confirmed musical instruments ever found. Imagine sitting in a freezing Ice Age cave, the fire crackling, and hearing the sound of a melody for the first time. Art and music were the glue that held larger social networks together, a way to build a shared identity and a competitive advantage over their Neanderthal neighbors. One family, 8 billion cousins. The final legs of the journey were among the most arduous. Between 25,000 and 15,000 years ago, groups crossed over the Beringia land bridge from Siberia into Alaska. From there they spread rapidly, moving down the Pacific coast and populating 2 entire continents. Within just a few thousand years, human footprints marked the land from the Arctic ice to the tip of South America. And then, just 12,000 years ago, we invented agriculture, and the story accelerated into the world you see today. Here's the punchline to this 300,000-year epic. Every empire, every language, every meme, and every mood ring began with those small groups of Africans who refused to sit still. Genetically, we are one of the most homogeneous species on the planet, far less diverse than our chimpanzee cousins. The DNA in your cheek carries the markers of their journey. Our irrational fear of snakes, our shared joy at a sunrise, the deep-seated urge to tell stories around a fire, there's an ancient apps still running on modern hardware. So next time you feel alone in a crowd, remember that you are statistically guaranteed to share a recent ancestor with every stranger you see. We are not separate races. We are one species that just got very good at swapping hats and exploring new neighborhoods. If this story lit a fire in you, hit subscribe. Each week we unpack another incredible chapter of the human epic, no lab coat required. And drop a comment below. If you could visit one moment on this prehistoric road trip, where would you go? The coast of South Africa to see the first engineers? Or a cave in France to watch an artist bring a bison to life? Let us know. Conclusion. From a corner of an African savanna to every continent on the planet, the birth of humanity is the ultimate underdog story. There were no spaceships, no superpowers, just restless feet, fiercely curious minds, and the stubborn, unbreakable hope that the next valley holds sweeter berries. We are all the great-great-great-grandchildren of those dreamers. Let's start acting like it. Kind to our cousins, curious about the unknown, and always ready for the next step of the journey.